Maybe I'm starting my webinar now, okay? Oh no, we're live. Hi, everybody. It's Graham Walker. Thank you so much for being here. I think we're already up to 30 people. Welcome to your first AI shift, our AI residency, as we're calling it. Brought to you by Offcall, which I co-founded. We're really excited to have you here. We've got two incredible guest stars who are going to help us learn about AI. We have done a bunch of various webinars with Off-Call and AI, and we really realized that people want to get more familiar with the technology and feel safe giving it a try and learning how to use it. So we're going to take you from the analogy of med student or pre-med all the way to attending in 4 sessions. We'll do 5 and 6 if people are excited and want to learn even more. We'll do them every like 4 to 6 weeks or so. So you are now in session 1. You're a med student, let's say, and we're going to kick it off. I will introduce my guest, Dr. Michael Hobbs. Michael's an incredible AI builder, tinkerer, importantly, physician as well. Michael, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in this topic?
Oh, happy to. So I was thinking about what I was going to do with my future when I wanted to grow up finally, and wanted to get into trying to use technology to make medicine better. And I'd lived through all the EHR evolution and everything else. And as I was starting my DPC practice, I was like, you know what? This is a good time to have a little extra time to contribute to the evolution of this next phase of technology in medicine.
Love it. We'll link to Michael's AI 101 guide, which is, if you haven't seen it, it's incredible. It is so good that it actually helped our next guest learn AI prompting as well. This is Rishma Javan. Rishma is honestly probably going to teach everybody on the webinar a lot because she is arguably AI native, I think, at this point. Rishma, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself as well? Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Hi, everyone. I am Rishma Jeevan. I am a Rush Medical student with a background in health tech startups and doing research in AI LLMs. And I'm very excited to be here. There's so much that we have to talk about and we've planned. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you so much, Rishma. Well, you guys are going to see, but in preparation for this, we were just asking how Rishma is using AI, and I was just like blown away. I think I know what I'm doing, and then Rishma is just like killing it over here. Okay, so I'll just tell you really briefly why we're doing this webinar series. We want people to like feel comfortable navigating AI, and we're saying AI, but this is mostly going to be about generative AI right now, and make people feel like they can actually start to use it in their personal lives and then in their clinical practice as well, and make sure that they're using it safely. The theme you're going to hear over and over is the best way to learn about generative AI is just to start using generative AI. Besides, putting PHI into the prompt, which you should not do. this is all virtual. This is all digital. You're not going to hurt a patient. You're not going to harm someone by trying out a prompt and experiencing it and playing around with it. So that is what we want to encourage you to do, just to learn and try this out. And here's kind of the general flow that we're thinking for the 4 webinars. You're in the first one here. Maybe you're a skeptic. Maybe you're already a user of AI. And then we're going to try to take you to like to evaluator and then leader. And then we'll hopefully have you vibe coding by, I mean, I'm not joking. We will have you vibe coding by session 4. I think the you will be blown away with how much you can build and how much you can kind of like download your brain and turn it into a web page or an application or a Mac app or an iPhone app, just with your own imagination and creativity and building the world you and the technology you want to see. Let's see. Next, I want to just, yeah, this is the framework that you probably use in medicine. See one, do one, teach one. If you're not in medicine, that's the framework we often use with trainees and learners like Rishma. I know it sounds crazy, but that is how I learned many of my procedures. And again, the best way to learn how to use this stuff is just to start using it. I want to take just a second and pause here so that people can log into a generative AI platform. The example here we're using is Claude. You can make an account on, the 3 most common ones would be Anthropic's Claude, ChatGPT from OpenAI, and Google's Gemini. You can use any of those models and use them for the exercise, the homework we're going to give you here today. So just be logged into one of these systems. They're all free to start and to use. I do pay for a bunch of the platforms myself to get like extra features, but you can get a ton of the way there by just trying it out completely for free. If you have a Google account, you can already have access to Gemini. You can make an account with Claude. You can make an account with ChatGPT as well. So just get logged into that on your phone or on a browser so that you can follow along and play along with us. Okay. This is just kind of another, I want to give people baby steps to get into this technology so they don't feel too overwhelmed. The way I recommend a lot of people start with AI is just something that you've probably taught your brain to think like, oh, maybe I could just Google the answer to that question. Well, if you have the same question, and you might use Google, try putting it into Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini. What Google is going to do is it's going to give you, it's going to find a web page that explains why the sky is blue. If you're using a large language model or generative AI, it's going to give you arguably a customized version. Maybe if it knows some information about you, it's going to know that you're a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist or you're pre-med or whatever it is that you are. If it knows things about you, it's going to be able to customize that information for you. And then maybe take it a step further. Try to do something even more complicated, like plan a trip. Give it some information about what you like to do on vacations. Do you like to relax? Do you like to hike? Do you like to see animals, wildlife, whatever it is? And then say, give me 7 days in Dublin or Ireland or Scotland or Iceland, and see what it does. It's remarkably good at that. We're using that in my family for many of our trips. You can have it draft emails. And then finally, we'll talk about how to use it in clinical medicine. And then just down here at the bottom, this is skill progression. The way you get better at this, just like any skill, just like anything we do in medicine, whether it is putting in an IV, whether it is delivering bad news, taking a history, examining the belly, you get better at it the more times you do it. And we don't throw Rishma into the wolves with the wolves and say, hey, you're a whatever. She's a 4th year, but we don't tell the 1st year med students, oh, hey, go put in a central line. We start by teaching them anatomy, and then we have them place IVs, peripheral IVs. We don't just throw people into the deep end. So the more practice you have with these tools, the better you will get at using them. and understanding when they are wrong or might fail you. And that's what we're going to dive into here in a second. Um, I wanted to just give a little segue and a break to have Rishma blow all of our minds with just maybe a few examples, Rishma, of how you personally in your daily life, it can be your personal life, it can be your helping your parents, it can be medical school. Like maybe just give us a couple ideas how you use generative AI this week already, because I found it fascinating just to hear the way that your brain is already adopting this technology.
Yeah, no, I think I started off exactly how you mentioned, just like small things, recipes, things like that. But I love thinking of AI as for my Devil Wears Prada fans, like an Emily to my Miranda. So it's really the assistant that allows me to like remove a lot of my admin or task or cognitive burden that frees up my time to do other things that I enjoy. And so, you don't know what you don't know. And so I loved initially using it to just open up the world of a new industry or like, hey, what's the best cross trainer that I should be using or why do these things matter? And then I've had moved on to having it analyze my CV or poke holes at like some theories or frameworks that I would build when I would work on my research or create my workout plans, you know, explain elements of a profile that I need to build out. And my favorite has been something that I have always worked on is having a personal curriculum in life because you're not going to always learn everything in school. And so I would pick a skill that I want to get really good at. And I would put it across different tools and say, I want to build this skill within this period of time, build out my curriculum. And this is the level I'm at. This is where I want to get it. And these are the experts I admire. These are things that I'm trying to achieve. And it would help build that out for me. And I've really enjoyed doing that. I did it today. I did it a couple of days ago as well. And that's how I got to my Nike Metcons for other things. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think it's really fun to be able to do that. I have friends who have had their parents' flights checked in by AI because they weren't going to wake up at 4 a.m. I've had recipes emailed to parents because they kept asking all their kids, like, what should we eat today? What should we eat today? And it was just so much easier to just like do this and really free up your time to do things that you're passionate about.
I love that. I think thinking of that's how I try to think of these tools as like, the world's best assistant. That doesn't mean they're perfect. It means they are really good at many skills. And I think that's often the analogy we use. I use when I'm explaining it to like clinical medicine to colleagues is like, think of like the world's best chief resident, or the world's best fellow, or one of your a junior attending. Like um, think of the AI assistant as someone that you have tremendous trust in that can like go execute and do things for you and is going to be pretty excellent at the job. I will start with like intentionally a not very good prompt because we're gonna it's a little foreshadowing. We're gonna make the prompt better. Just you really can ask any question here. I'm gonna switch over to another screen. And because these tools are so good, I actually had to like make a new account um, because Claude knows too much about me, and so it actually made the prompt too good. So hopefully you guys can see my screen here. I'll make this maybe a little bit bigger. Okay. This is a fresh new account, and I made that because these models um, have memory, so they do tend to optionally. You can turn this off if you want, but they do tend to learn about you um, over time. And so as you tell it things about yourself, like I live in San Francisco, I'm an emergency physician. I have a nephew. I like to go hiking. It won't remember all of those facts immediately every time, but over time, it will start to gather these facts and collate them so that it is now going to give me a custom answer based on the fact that Claude knows that I like to hike. And so if I say, where should I go for a walk in San Francisco? It may suggest some hiking trails as opposed to some urban streets or something like that because it knows about me. Okay, so I'm going to use the haiku model, which is kind of the fastest model. I'm also not going to use something called extended thinking, which makes the models kind of work harder. And I'm just going to ask it like a really basic question. Intentionally vague. This is, arguably probably not a really good question for anybody to ask a large language model because it's just kind of too vague. I literally don't know how it's going to answer this question. But it's going to probably give me a pretty generic answer because all it knows is the user is a generic human being. Lower back pain is common, rest when needed. But again, pretty good, like it knows you. We actually don't recommend prolonged bed rest, over-the-counter pain relievers, strengthen your core. Love that. When to seek professional help. Again, pretty damn good at this point with just a generic prompt. The last thing I will say, and then we'll move on to improving the prompt, is if you've heard of this term of prompt engineering, that's what we're going to explain a little bit today. But the models and the companies actually are, I think, getting better at taking what us feeble humans do and then actually on their end improving the prompt to give a better answer regardless of how bad the human's prompt is. Okay. I'm going to pivot back to my other screen here. And then I think Michael is going to actually show us a better, there we go. I'm going to close this here, show us a better way of prompting. Michael, do you want to maybe just briefly touch on hallucinations and assumptions and generic information?
Absolutely. So one thing that hallucinations gets thrown out a lot when people are worrying about LLMs and AI tools. And one way to think about them is if you don't give them a lot of information to work with to begin with, they can get more creative with their answer. So if you say, hey, tell me about red things, you can get 1,000 different answers for that versus tell me something that's red, that's a fruit, that's about the size of, and you're going to get less hallucinations. The other thing that is the biggest issue, and maybe one of the bigger concerns in medicine, if you're using these tools, is the sycophancy. Like these tools are designed to give you what you want. So if you're saying, hey, I need something, it's going to try really hard to give it to you, even if it has to make it up. And that's why double checking it, just like you might double check a learner's note or somebody else's report on something, you want to get into the habit of sort of saying, hey, I've looked this over, this resonates with me, I agree with what it's saying, it's in line with what I want. And that sort of kind of ties right into wrong assumptions also, right? So if you lead it in one direction, it's going to go in that direction. If you give it room to move, it's going to move in multiple directions. And so what you put in is very impactful to what you get out. And a mental model you might want to keep in mind for any clinician is if a patient comes in and says, I have a fever, you're like, and? But if they come in and say, I have a fever for 3 days and my ear hurts or my throat hurts and it's red and my kid has strep, your differential is narrowed. So your field of answers has gotten much smaller based on that context. And you won't start with the wrong assumptions. You'll get to the right answer. LLMs work very similarly. So I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going
I
to
love that.
replace
Michael,
Graham.
let me just, as you're sharing, I'll just say, truly, the way Michael explained it is these tools truly have been designed to try to answer your question. Like when they were originally being programmed and kind of guided and steered and given feedback, people would give an answer, and if the answer was not kind of sycophantic and helpful, that answer would get downvoted. Like people would say, no, no, don't answer it that way, and it would get encouraged to answer it in a helpful way. Now you can imagine that helpfulness is great at trying to help a human, but you can also imagine in medicine that may be a bit of a challenge. Sometimes like disagreeing with a colleague is actually a really good thing. It's a good thought experiment. Sometimes interrupting a patient or disagreeing with a patient is actually really helpful. Like I thought Michael was going to say, oh, I have a fever. And then we actually have to say, well, what was your actual temperature? Because, oh, they said 99. Well, that's not a fever. So that is one of the common things where a lot of people are writing and talking about right now in medicine is, hey, sycophancy is great for a consumer product. It might actually not be what we want in a medical product or a medical tool.
Exactly. All right, so I'm going to try to just give a different spin on Graham's prompt. So what I did is I've turned on Opus here instead of Haiku. And so Opus is the bigger thinking model from Claude. And what I'm going to start with is giving it more specific instructions. I want a differential diagnosis. I want it aimed at me. Here's the patient's information. And so I can keep going and going, or I can, at this point, say, okay, let's start with that amount of information. And you're going to see maybe some thinking traces here. And so already we've got information to work with. And what I like to do is, as it's streaming, this is called streaming tokens. It's sort of giving you information as it comes in. And you can start scanning it. You don't have to wait for the whole response to come through. And you can start saying, okay, it seems like it's on track. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's really off track. And one thing I want to teach you about early on, right? It's giving us some good, interesting, and significant things to pay attention to. But let's say it gives it to you in a format that you don't like. You can just tell it, nope, not like that, do it again. And so now it's asking me like, hey, no, it's like, hey, are you sure about that? No significant past medical history. And then when you're working with LLMs, multi-turn is really important. You can say, oh, that's more than I want, and make it shorter, and it'll do it, right? Because maybe you don't want to read that much. And then I want to quickly show you guys something that started back when I started using LLMs. So in the same vein, this was the exact prompt I gave to ChatGPT 4 in 2023. So I was sitting there working on my notes and I said, okay, wonder if it can write a note for me. So I put this in and I got this back, right? So it gives me an assessment, it gives me a vague diagnosis. And I said, okay, I didn't give you enough instructions. So what I did is I gave it a better prompt. This is what I want you to do. Here's more information. Here's what I want you to include in it. And, we were just talking about hallucinations. And what I found with this response from ChatGPT 4, this is, again, a 3-year-old model, which in AI terms is an ancient model, is you'll see I gave it no vitals, but it gave me vitals back. And so it completely made those up all on its own. And so that's where you got to kind of pay attention, because this looks like a really impressive note. It's got ICD-10 codes, it's got a planet, it's got a full exam that I did not provide for it. And so there's multiple hallucinations in just this single prompt. Models are much better than that, but this is the thing to pay attention to.
Michael, I love that. In the same way that I try to, remind people, this technology has pros and cons, and it's just a technology. There's good and bad. You could imagine if you want to have a model create a bunch of fake notes. Fake vital signs are great. That it can, the models are. It blew my mind when I started using these tools, and I had a simulated patient in the ER, and I gave the simulated patient epinephrine, and the model knew that when I asked it to repeat the vital signs, the patient had become tachycardic and hypertensive. These things are they tremendously are powerful. They can understand the semantic meaning of what it truly means to give epinephrine. It understands the relationship between epinephrine and blood pressure and heart rate. So those things are incredibly powerful, but you can imagine using them the wrong way, just like using a scalpel the wrong way can be dangerous as well. Using succinylcholine when you don't mean to give succinylcholine is very dangerous. That's the one thing that I like to point out to health system leaders as well, is look, you put tremendous trust in your healthcare workers to already know how to assess risk and benefit, and use these tools, use medicines and drugs appropriately. And so that's kind of part of the reason we're doing these webinars, is if we can teach people about these tools, just like you can teach somebody how to use a scalpel safely, or when to give propofol and how much to give safely, you can actually use these tools appropriately. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint here, and this is a little bit of a framework. Just if you're having trouble with your prompt, giving telling the AI who it's supposed to be. Like in Rishma's example, oh, you're the world's best assistant. It could be you're an attending cardiologist, or it can be you speak at a fifth grade, you write and read at a fifth grade reading level. Giving it a role, again, like Michael said, giving it context. Let it understand what you're actually trying to get out of it. Give a specific output that you want. You want it in SOAP note format. You want it as bullet points. You want it as a limerick. It will do all of those things without any problem whatsoever. You can also, if it's struggling, give it like literally one example. If say you want 10 marketing slogans and it's giving you a paragraph each, just say, oh no, I don't want it that way, and give it one example. Like, for example, the marketing slogan should be no more than 7 words, and then write out the 7 words. It is amazing at how much better it will give you as results. And then give it some constraints. I want a marketing proposal, but it cannot be, it can't cost more than $1,000, or it can't take more than 5 hours to implement, whatever. So giving it more context and constraint actually will make your outputs better. This is a section that I thought might be good, especially for those of us that have been out of medical training for a while. I wanted Michael and Reshma to just reflect on like what actually is good feedback, what helps people learn. Reshma, what have you found like in clinical rotations and preclinical time that you actually found helpful when you're learning any skill, whether it's AI or clinical medicine?
The first thing I learned was to not say that I have a dumb question and say I have a very basic question to build my foundation. And that really helped position me to be a curious learner instead of someone who felt guilty about not knowing something. And that's sort of how I approach pretty much everything. I believe a top-down approach is the best for my brain, and so I recommend it to others. But I say, start with just understanding. You can just say, like, what is AI and what is its capacity right now? And then work your way from it. And so you'll find there's like generative, there's things that you can build agents, and there's building it, there's talking about it, there's learning about code, but there's also where is it fitting into healthcare? And so I always say that you don't know what you don't know. And so if you can just get yourself like the first line of exposure and maintain that curiosity to keep building and diving deeper. And then at some point, as we all know, that I said to my friend, reading about running is not the same as running. And so just trial and error, start, sending in prompts and seeing if it's good, if it's bad. And something that I really like about Claude is that if your prompt doesn't have enough information for it to produce an answer, it will actively ask you really pointed questions. And it doesn't leave it to free response, which is really nice when you're coming into asking something or learning something or creating something that is new to you, and you can't build that context right up front. So I say start with the top down, learn a little bit, keep going, stay curious, and then trial and error, just dive deep.
I love that. Michael, you have done a ton of work educating clinicians on AI topics and tools. What have you found to be helpful, maybe specifically for like a healthcare audience?
I think the thing that I keep going back to the most is to think of the AI tools as really smart, like even medical students, medical learners who have a huge access to a lot of information, but don't necessarily know how to use it in the best way. And if you approach it by saying, hey, I'm going to sort of give you a little guidance, I'm going to give you a little direction, I'm going to give you some boundaries, see what comes back, see where their strengths are, see where their challenges are, give it feedback. That's what I'm looking for. That's not what I'm looking for. And at the same time, understanding that LLMs actually work like we think in medicine. They're probabilistic, right? We start getting a little bit of information and we start forming theories, we start forming differentials. And so if you start thinking like, hey, this thing thinks like I do as far as how I'm going to give it information, how I want to receive information, and how I'm going to process information, getting from point A to point B becomes a different experience than what do I do with this thing? And so smart intern, smart medical student, teach it how to use the tools, help it, guide it. Don't give it too much negative feedback, right? We don't want to hurt any LLM feelings in case the robots take over someday. But it's just a really good mental model to think of it that way, because most of us have done some teaching at some point. Most of us have been taught at some point, and we understand what works for us as far as getting information out of us. And so if you just keep having that interaction with the large language models and the foundational tools, then you'll have good success.
Love it. Okay, we're going to jump into some questions here from the audience. I'm just going to skim through what I've seen so far, and comments. Nooper says that you can actually you don't have to make a new account for Claude. You can just have it wipe its memory. I just didn't want to wipe my own memory because it's I've spent so much work getting it to understand me, and it like is I've like customized it so much because I'm such a nerd like that. First, one of the questions Daniel Lee asked, can you talk about your perspective on what the big deal or implications are of agentic AI? And what are the worries about security? So the way I think of agentic AI, because that's one of the hotter buzzwords more recently, I think of generative AI as, you ask a question or give it an input, it gives you text or other types of output. Agentic AI takes that output and actually tells, you can tell the model, hey, I'm going to give you permission to do something. You can set the rules. I'm going to give you permission to search Google Flights, or I'm going to give you permission to search Google Flights, and I'm going to give you my credit card number, and you can book a flight. You can imagine those two are very, very different things and have very different levels of risk associated with those. I think we're still a fair ways off from agentic AI being commonplace in medicine. That being said, at the big HIMSS Health IT conference a couple weeks ago, Epic showed that they are trying to build an agentic, a place where health systems can build their own agents as well. Now, I think all of us in healthcare understand that some of our work is automatable, and that like the example I use, every time somebody breaks their ankle, I pretty much always put in a referral to podiatry or orthopedics. So there is some amount of our work that is predictable, and I would love an agent to just put in a referral to orthopedics for me. But we have to obviously make sure that those tools are working properly, that they don't put in bad referrals. So that's kind of the way I think about agentic AI. Michael, Rishma, other thoughts on agentic AI in the future? It certainly
Yeah, I
will
just
make
want
its
to
way to healthcare eventually. I just don't think we're widely there yet.
Yeah, and it'll make its way there eventually officially. I just want to make sure that we touch on it. I'm aware that a lot of people are super excited about hearing about OpenClaw and all the claws and Mac minis, and man,
Yep.
that sounds cool. But we all work with very sensitive information, and it's easy for that to leak back and forth. So I just want you to be super careful, read about what you're doing, learn about what you're doing, isolate what you're doing. And it is cool to learn, it is cool to experiment, just be really careful about what it can spill into.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead,
go
Risha.
ahead. Yeah, I agree. I think of agentic AI akin to when I would build automations. So there was a time when I worked in startups and I build things specifically within the RCM space. And we loved building automations that helped us free up, time from doing data entry and admin tasks. And so I like to think of it that way because then I start thinking about, okay, where can I identify its goal? The parameters I want it to follow, what am I okay with it doing, what am I not okay with it doing, and how it supports my work instead of thinking of it as something that's this like big bad wolf that's going to replace me. And this really helps create, I think, a more symbiotic relationship. So I think perspective is really important here. But it's also great to always ask about the security and the risk associated with that because we don't talk about it enough, I think, because I remember somebody asked me, well, ChatGPT has the capacity to take my medical information. And I said, wait, it's not HIPAA secure. And they said, what's that? And so it does fall on all of us to be really diligent about asking those questions because a lot of the population is vulnerable and unaware of things like that. So I welcome those questions. I think it's really good to point those towards the teams that are working on these things within your system where you're working. But also thinking of it as something that, like an automation, that we wouldn't have opposed a few years ago.
Yeah, I think that the interesting challenge and why medicine is wonderful and challenging is I think we could probably all come up with scenarios where 99% of the time we do X, and then there's 1% of the time based on the patient's individual unique characteristics or something we know about them or their past medical history that we don't do X. And so you can imagine if you build a system that just does X every single time, no matter what, that is going to hurt that 1% of people, and a doctor would know to not do things that way, for example. I'm going to get to a couple more questions here, and then we'll have a time for more questions in a few minutes as well. Lucian Ferraru asks if, do you think ambient scribes will eventually replace structured templates, or will we always need guardrails for billing and compliance? That's a great question. I think ambient scribes have gotten a lot of adoption widely in healthcare. It depends a little bit. Lucian, it depends on, frankly, what's the point of a clinical note? Is it to just document stuff for billing purposes? Is it to communicate between two specialists? I mean, that's the thing that I think is really interesting about AI is it actually fundamentally gets us down to like principles and values of like, what's the point of all of this? Because it takes it takes so much of the effort out of building a better mousetrap. Okay, there's a lot more questions coming in. Uh, I'm gonna start looking at the questions so I can work on them, and then maybe Michael, I'll pass it over to you and Rishma to talk about Notebook LM, and then I'm gonna start looking at questions to talk about as well. How's that sound?
Rishma, yeah, it sounds great. Rishma, I'm going to intro you to this if that's okay.
Yeah.
So there's a guide I built that you guys will have a reference to at the end. It's called, it's an AI 101 and it's meant for clinicians. And one of the first tools I recommend is Notebook LM because I think it's really great to just jump in, start doing stuff, a lot of utility to it. And Rishma is going to show us how she's using it.
Yes. So before I share my screen, I just want to say Notebook LM has been my savior in more ways than I can say, and I'm very grateful for that. But it has evolved immensely since the first time it came out, so that's really exciting. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Great. So some of the work that I do is I'm working with the Rush faculty to build an AI curriculum for medical school so that medical students, when they're coming out and going to residency and in the workforce, they're equipped to manage the many AI solutions that are coming their way and how it's going to be a part of their workflow. And so initially, a couple of years ago, what I would do was just put in one PDF of a research article. And then click audio overview, and it gave me this little podcast overview while I would do the dishes or something like that. And what I love about Notebook LM being able to do that is that with most of your other agents, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, it's searching across the net. But here you can specifically identify the sources you want it to interact with to build out the material that you want. So now that I have gone beyond putting research articles here and looking at getting podcast overviews of them, I can, I can put in a prompt here. It will search up multiple sources. I can select the ones I want. I can also add sources of my own, and it will, in fact, even look through my drive if there is something that I've had here. And it will provide this really succinct summary of what's going on. But then I can go on to build out like a podcast version of it or a mind map if I will, because these are the frameworks that are being currently utilized. And then it will, as I click on more of it, it will then start enabling the chat to highlight and deep dive into those components as it pulls from the sources on the left. Similarly, I can also pull in like an infographic and create that I may want to post somewhere, and then you can improve it if you want by giving it more feedback. It can also create your slide decks for you. And what I think is really cool about that is that you can, in fact, if you have certain brand colors or like the academic institution you go to and you need those logos on there, you can upload those and it will update that as well. And I think now it also has the capacity to create something when you do a video overview as a cinematic experience. So it's like a truly, I would think like sci-fi in my opinion, because it's just like moving and really immersive. And so it really takes your presentations to another level. And then you can customize slide by slide, or video, segment by segment as well, and then ask within this chat more questions and do a deeper dive and add more resources as you want. And so I really love doing that. It's great because I don't like going into anything that I'm reading without understanding at least like a framework of what's going on here. Research papers a while ago were not my strong suit when I was reading them. So this is really, really helpful for that. And I think all of us who have busy lives and would like to habit stack, this is really helpful for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Rishma. Michael, how are you using Notebook LM? I don't use it a ton, and I know there are a bunch of new features that it's deployed as well over the past couple months. I think it, like you were telling me, I think it probably was the thing that actually kept Google competitive in the space.
Yeah, so I primarily use it like, let's say a new guideline comes out. I'll toss that single article in there. I'll say, hey, give me a podcast, give me an infographic, give me a patient handout. I can interrogate it, I can ask questions. And so it's really nice because you can create different outputs for different audiences. You can, as Rishma was showing you, there's prompt spaces. You can say, give me an infographic so I can share this information with a elementary school class, for example, or a handout for parents on this topic. And so I like being able to take the data and then digest it in a way that makes the most sense to me, whether it's visually, whether it's a podcast. And I know that that audio feature is very, very popular with clinicians who are trying to digest some information on the drive in between home and work.
Amazing. I'm gonna just see. I think we're back to another question break, and there's so many good questions coming in. I'm gonna flag a few of them. Nikhil Shaw says, as physicians, we're super worried about privacy, as we should be. Do you suggest we frame a prompt using a template? Um, Allows us to safely input adequate data. Nikhil, it's a challenge. Check out the AI one-on-one guide that we link to with from Michael. But fundamentally, that's again the pro and the con of generative AI is you have to give it your own context. If you're an ER doctor, you don't want the same answer as a cardiologist or a pediatrician or a medical student, and so there are generic templates you can use to help frame it in a medical context, sure, but you do need to give it your own individual, like why are you asking the question in the first place? Do you want, like, if you're asking why the sky is blue, well, why do you want to know? It kind of gets you back down to, you just, you want to know the science behind it. You want to know what are the chemicals in the atmosphere that changes the color of the sun, all that stuff. Next, there's a question. When you're using a tool, how often are you letting patients know that AI has been adopted? I think it, again, for me at least, and guys feel free to jump in here. For me, it depends on how you're using the tool. I don't ask for patients' permission or even, inform them if I'm using MD Calc, if I'm using UpToDate, if I'm looking up something as a reference. So I think it depends a little bit on how you're using it. Certainly, if you're using it to inform your own clinical judgment, I think I think there's some value in letting the patient know that how you're using these tools. But again, if you're looking up a drug dosage with micromedics, you're probably not asking for the patient's permission or informing them of that. They expect that. So we're in a weird transition time where things are changing quite quickly with what patients expect, what clinicians expect as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important the way I separate it is, when is the patient going to experience the AI interaction and when is it just for me? So when I use AI scribes, when I use AI assistants that, like my receptionist is an AI receptionist. So I blanket send out a letter to my entire practice saying, this is coming, this is how it's going to be used, this is how you might interact with it. And if you have any issues with it, let me know. But I don't make any significant effort to say, hey, I'm looking something up on an AI tool, because that's how I'm using it. But if they're going to interface with it, I want them to know when they're interfacing with AI.
Yeah. Italo Marroquin from Chapin, from Guatemala City. Hi, Italo. Our healthcare management and rev cycle agents related in any way. They are related in that they're both kind of agentic AI, but I don't outside of a few small areas, I'm not seeing it much in the way of clinician agents just yet. But we're seeing them in the peri-clinical space, like Michael said, of like an AI receptionist that is going to be scheduling appointments and has some interface with a clinician. Okay, I'm gonna keep us going. Oh my God, how are we almost out of time already? I'm probably gonna just fly through the craft stuff, guys, so that we have time to take more questions because that's what everyone's excited by. Okay. Um, we have a brief framework here that maybe I'll just kind of fly through here, and Rishma and Michael, feel free to add in here. I think as you're getting more comfortable with using generative AI and looking at the outputs, every so often you will start to notice errors. Um, there probably are more errors than you actually notice, and that is the fundamental challenge about these tools is they are often so good and so verifiably accurate that you start to rely on them and trust them in a way that we maybe shouldn't, but that's fundamentally human psychology, folks. Like it's hard, when something is right 99 times out of 100, if a coin is flipping heads 99 times out of 100, you're probably going to bet on heads on the 100th time. So this is just a brief framework on how to think about how to assess these models. I think this fundamentally may be a skill that we need to train us humans on, from medical students to residents and fellows and attendings. How do you assess? It's an ability to assess misinformation, just like there's misinformation on social media. Okay, is this thing complete? Did it actually do what you asked it to do? Like Michael showed, you can interrupt it and stop it and say, no, 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 no. I don't want, you're giving me 7 pages long on lower back pain. Give me the 5 bullets I need. Give me the really key information. Can you trace where this came from? Back to somebody's point about asking for more information. You can prompt these models and say, you must include your sources. It won't always do that. Sometimes it will also hallucinate sources, but the models are getting much better about this. But does the model explain why it said what it said based on a resource? If you can have it do that, that's probably going to increase your likelihood that the model is correct. But even that's not perfect either.
Graham, quick note on the citations.
Yeah.
2 things to think about with citations. They do hallucinate completely made up citations, but more often than not, when they're hyperlinking to citations, when you're asking for them, the back end citation has moved. So PubMed will just change the identifier. Yep. And when it clicks through, it just clicks that into a new article. That doesn't mean the LLM picked the wrong one. It just used old information that it was trained on and hasn't been updated.
Yeah, that's a great point. The way these models work is they are, you dump trillions of PubMed articles and abstracts into these models, and then they make a bunch of connections and weights and all this other technical stuff. And they're also often not, if they're not searching the web, they're not going to also come up with the most recent information. Next up, we have accurate. Did it get these details? Did it get the details right? I fundamentally think you need to trust your gut on this. You can vibe check this a little bit, and then this is one of my concerns about using generative AI with learners and trainees. If I'm saying you to trust your gut, well, you got to develop a gut first. And how do you develop a gut? You develop a gut by experience. And so that's, I think, one of the interesting challenges that academics and program directors will have is how do we establish clinical gestalt and your gut and your spidey sense if AI is kind of giving you the answer immediately.
And for clinicians who are working on accuracy, the best way to try out new models is to give it some prompts about things so you can actually measure it against the information you already have.
F is for fit. So this can be kind of fit or format. Did this actually do what you asked it to do? I was using Claude earlier this morning, and I said, give me 10 I do this. It'll give me like one marketing idea, and it'll say, "Give me 10 alts, give me 10 alternative options," and it kept giving me three, and so I had to like kind of nudge it or yell at it and be like, "No, no, no, you didn't actually give me 10," and it said, "No, no, no, I did give you 10." I was like, "No, you gave me three." So again, is this fitting what you asked it to do? And then finally, like, is this transparent? Um, to the sycophancy point, these models have a hard time saying no. In Claude's documents, they actually recommend that you prompt it and tell it, "Hey, if you're not certain about this, that should be your answer. It's okay to tell me I don't know." I think that's actually true of all of clinical medicine. I think physicians and medical students, we should feel comfortable saying, I actually don't know the answer to that question, and but I'm happy to find out. I mean, that's the best way to be a good med student and say, "Oh, I don't know, but I'll find out." Like your attending can never get mad at you for that. But the AI really, it wants to answer your questions. It wants to help you, and unfortunately, the way it sometimes helps you is by making stuff up, and not giving you an actual real answer. To Michael's point about citations, it will sometimes fake citations that are in a proper like APA format. And so it'll see, it'll sell like, it'll have the journal, cell biology, and a page number, and then an edition and a year, and then you search for that on Google to find the real paper, and it does not exist. Okay. I think we should probably just skip this because we are out of time. Oh my God, how are we out of time? We will send out these slides. I'm going to fly through these so we can get to some more questions here as well. In our last few minutes as well. Let's see, other questions here. I feel more comfortable with open evidence up to date than general LLMs. Might general LLMs like ChatGPT and Claude hallucinate more and be less current than the resources I mentioned? That's a great question. For the first time ever, the foundational models that open evidence and others are probably using up to date are using, they are starting to compete with the open evidence and up to date themselves because they can. It's a really interesting time. I think probably, and I actually don't know the answer to this question. I would hypothesize that the specific tools are more accurate. I don't know specifically about hallucination rates, but I don't know if that will be true in 6 months. I think everybody wants a piece of that sweet healthcare dollar. And so everybody is highly interested in solving these problems. I'm going to get my chat window back open here so I can see other questions. Oh my God, there's so many. Let's see. There were some questions about MCP servers and connections. We will cover that probably, I think, in probably like the advanced section 4, but we will definitely get there. Let's see. What do you think of DocsGPT? Again, DocsGPT, Vera Health, Glass Health, all of these tools are trying to do similar things. Honestly, I would not be at all surprised if Epic is going to try to do this too. That's what Epic does, is they say, "Oh, we could do that." So I wouldn't be surprised if Epic starts to work on that as well.
Graham, I saw a question.
Yeah, please.
Do we suggest physicians set up their own private servers so PHI is better protected? I love the intention there. The execution is the tricky part. And so there's lots of kinds of PHI. There's direct, there's indirect PHI. And you have to do a lot to fully secure your own machine. And then you have to run a local model, which creates more complexity. And so I would encourage everybody who's at this session and early in their learning process to not worry about open models and local models and focus on, hey, what are the tools that my organization provides for me? Maybe they're already covered by HIPAA and BAA, so it's less risky to even to think about that. But the other thing to do is just get in a good habit of paying attention to what data is going in that prompt, no matter what you're using or where you're using it.
I'll just there was a comment or a question about who owns the liability. Look, clinicians on the call, it is you. I would love a world where the technology companies have decided, yeah, we're going to own up to this. We have some responsibility and liability here as well. Guys, they don't want to do that. They have no interest in that. Who wants to volunteer and say, oh yeah, we're going to be liable? They would love to push all of the liability onto you, the clinician. And frankly, the most recent thing I've seen from the state medical boards is their policy is the clinician owns the liability as well. The buck stops with the doctor, the nurse, the pharmacist, whoever's using the tool. That is why we are doing these webinars to train people. Is unless we have some massive sweeping new regulatory change with which I would love, a joint liability structure that understands that these tools are transformational but carry risk as well. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, ChatGPT or open evidence told me so is not going to be a defensible argument. Um, and so I don't, the liability questions are not answered. And as of March 25th, 2026, I think it is fundamentally all on the treating licensed clinician, licensed nurse, whoever it is.
And the ultimate decision maker, right? Whoever
Yeah.
makes the call, makes the order. It isn't any different than a medical student or a resident. Like if they bring you information and you act on it, you are still assuming the liability for the information that was acquired by this second party. So AI tools are exactly the same. If they bring you information, you say, okay, I'm going to do that. You decided to do that. You
Yeah.
ordered that test. You ordered that medication.
Yeah, and that's obviously why agentic is a different
Mhm.
beast because agentic, the agent is deciding to do it for you on your behalf. And frankly, guys, this is why I'm so passionate about AI. I talk about it so much on LinkedIn. This is why clinicians need to be in the room,
Mhm.
influencing these decisions, influencing and understanding how this technology works and how it's deployed in health systems, because we are the ones, who carry the malpractice risk. We're the ones who are going to have to sit in front of the patient and at 2 a.m. and make these tough decisions. Uh, yeah. In
Oh,
our
yeah. Well, I
last,
saw.
yeah,
Oh, go
please,
ahead.
Michael. No, go ahead, Michael.
I
Last
saw
question. Yeah.
a really good question coming in here. When will we have AI first primary care, meaning AI being the first interface, the virtual front door, and the AI agent will only escalate this to a human physician when it needs it? It's already happening, right? There are several companies out there. One of them has gotten prescribing rights in a state to do refills, and so there are already interfaces where people are interacting with AI first, and sometimes only to finish getting like a prescription refilled. So it's here, and that's why, again, to Graham's point, we should be out there helping these because there's a lot of people who have a lot of ideas about how to fix medicine that have no experience in medicine.
Yeah. Who have never made a diagnosis, who've never missed a diagnosis. Like I fundamentally think it is people who see patients and who have carry that weight and that responsibility are just fundamentally going to deploy and use these technologies differently when they have to break bad news, when they have to talk about a complication, when they have to uh, tell somebody good news. Just looking at someone in the eyes and telling them information. That is why we are licensed professionals. That is why we are professionals in the first place. I will get off my soapbox there. We're coming up to the last 2 minutes here. I obviously am very passionate about this stuff. I just wanted to plug a few more important things here. First, we have an incredible white paper series that's going to be coming out thanks to Rishma and her colleagues at MD Plus. Rishma, do you want to tell us what you guys have built or what we'll be announcing over the next coming months?
Yes. So I'm, of course, representing MD Plus here, and I am very excited to announce that in partnership with Offcall, we have a white paper series that goes over AI across almost 8 to 9 specialties. We have had a wonderful team of medical students and residents and with some physicians involved in writing these. I know how much work went into it. I led the internal medicine paper. We're really excited. We talk about all of these things. We talk about what the current landscape is, what the future holds, what kinds of products are already in place, and where we fall behind. And I agree with, what we've talked about here, where we need to have more and more physicians in decision-making rooms, but not just as a checkbox, but with the ability to have their decision-making capacity fully there. And if they say no, the answer is no. But if they say this is where we're going, that's what's happening. And I have a health tech background. I came into the space because I knew that there were decisions being made without physicians. And I strongly also feel, well, really strongly about this. So whichever specialty you're in, I think there's going to be a lot of really fun learning points and points that will, I'm sure, spark really interesting debates and conversations within your own field. And we're really excited to have this release soon as an ebook.
Amazing. It's going to be incredible. I think we're going to learn a ton from medical students and residents about our own specialties, honestly. Next up, I just want to plug if you go to offcall.com, offcall.com/referrals, Jake, our CEO, and myself just got back from Columbus, Ohio. We are trying to fix the broken referral system in the United States. We have a manifesto we've written as well. And we just launched today in Columbus, Ohio, and coming to a community near you to try to improve referrals for primary care doctors, specialists, and of course, most importantly, patients. Our next webinar, May 6th, we will send you guys a reminder and an invite. We will be paring down the hundreds, thousands of AI tools down to like 3 of our favorites. Probably Notebook LM is in that 3. And then I've got a QR code up here. There's a bit.ly URL as well. If you want to go way deeper, and the way that I discovered so much of Michael's passion is going to his AI 101, a self-paced guide to AI in medicine. It is an incredible website, an incredible resource. Please check it out. It is free. There are no ads. It is for his love of the game. And because Michael is just such an incredible advocate for learning and tinkering and finding your own journey and understanding this stuff, because it is going to impact everything you do. That is it. It is 6:02 my time here in San Francisco. It's even later for Reshma and Michael. I just want to thank everybody for being here. Please feel free to shoot me an email, send me a DM on LinkedIn. I will try to answer additional questions that we didn't get to here as well. We're so excited for the next AI webinar, 102, we will call it. And yeah. Closing thoughts, Michael, Reshma.
I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, we will see everybody in early May. Sign up, check out the white papers coming, check out the off-call referral guide, and check out Michael's AI 101 series. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.